Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. And today's lecture is on motivation. A little bit of a tough subject as the research base is not definitive. There's a lot of information in the popular press and in pop psychology, like we've talked about, in terms of motivation. But in terms of research, there's a lot of great theories that we'll talk about, but nothing too concrete, as in this is what you do to build motivation. So it's a little bit slippery, but nonetheless, we will move forward. So I love this quote to get us thinking is that people often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing, so that's why we recommend it daily. So Zig Ziglar is a sales coach. He's a pretty famous author and motivational speaker, and he feels that motivation comes and goes, which is true. It waxes and wanes, and that we need repeated shots of it on a daily basis to keep it full. And not sure if that's true, but nonetheless, motivation, again, is not real well defined. So when we talk about motivation and the study of motivation, we need to understand what gets people to initiate behavior change. Because we know behavior change is hard, it's not easy, but sometimes it can be easier than others. So, where does motivation come from? And most importantly, how do we continue it so that we are motivated for the long term to maintain those changes? Most people think you either have it or you don't, and that's not true because it's much more complex than that. And a definition of motivation, it helps us to understand not only why we do the things we do, but also why our behavior can change when our focus gets redirected or shifting. And motivation can be stated as a psychological energy that's directed towards a goal. It comes from the Latin word, which means mover. And so I guess it's not mover, it would be mover or something like that. Let's make it all sexy. But what it means is to move. So motivation comes from the Latin stem to move. And you could say that motivation is what moves people. And of course, I'm going to bring in Maslow. He's one of my faves. And from the humanistic movement, we talked about him in positive psychology. And Maslow said that we are naturally oriented to want to get better and better and to support ourselves in climbing that mountain and getting to the top. So we will do everything we need to. And Maslow was only one theorist. In the earlier days, everyone thought motivation was all about biological instincts, that we were driven, that there was a pattern, that we were motivated, just to satisfy these biological instincts, sex, shelter, thirst, etc. And along the way in the years, as we learned more about biology and environment and the interplay, Maslow's theory still stands as a strong theory of motivation, that there are psychological needs as well as innate biological needs. And, this need for achievement, affiliation, power, there are these not only physiological drives, but also psychological drives. And again, just like Zig Ziglar said, it does change. You could be highly motivated in the morning to put action towards a goal, and then by the end of the day, you're like, forget it. I don't know if you've ever done that, but I sure have. And some theorists later have talked about quality of motivation, which I find fascinating, and I tend to affiliate with some of the later theorists on quality that we'll talk about. And, again, it comes down to why, I want to, but moving towards I want to because. And, people's reasons are very important in terms of why they do what they do. And to be able to identify strong whys can be very helpful when motivation wanes. And again, when we change behavior, behaviors give both positive and negative. Again, going back to there's pros, there's cons, um, you know, there's reasons why we do what we do. And a lot of times when we change, it's more negative before it becomes more positive. And again, people use behaviors to cope with stress, to handle negative things in our lives, whether they're emotions or activities or um, things that happen in our lives. So, stress again and stress control and stress mitigation is one of our hallmarks of behavior modification, learning how to deal with life stresses, because there's one thing that's for certain, it's death, taxes, and we know that stress is going to be there. And again, just reiterating the fact that as motivation waxes and wanes, behavior change needs to be for the long haul. So it's for long term, and we need people to be able to weather the storms and the highs and the lows, and to be able to find the upswing when they are in the downswing. Like maybe right now, we are in a little bit of a downswing and hoping for the upswing soon. I'm going to go through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Again, what this says is that first and foremost, and oh, I'm sorry, I think it might have been cut off a little bit, is physiological needs need to be met first. That's the bottom of the pyramid. And so you can't move into psychological motivating needs until you've met your physiological needs, which makes sense, because if you're not breathing, if you're not eating, if you're not hydrated, you will not want to talk about your philosophies of self-actualization, creativity, and morality. You know what I mean? So we have more pressing needs when we're not breathing. So, Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about the fact that, once our basic needs are met, then we can move on into determining and supporting our higher levels of psychological needs, such as, again, our inner relationships, our need for being with people and connecting, our need for self-esteem and self-awareness, and then again, our goal into self-actualization, which is the highest level of achievement with ourselves. So hierarchy needs, a lot of times what we'll talk about with people is before we can crawl, walk, or before we can run, we have to crawl and walk. And so, checking to see, do they have the capacity? Are they making choices between food and electricity? Well, then it's probably not a time to talk about intrinsic levels of motivation, right? So we got to take care of first things first, and then we can move on to other areas. And so that might be important for you as a coach to know where your client is on this hierarchy of needs. Another wonderful theory on motivation that I love is the Orlowski grid. And this gets a little woo-woo, not trying to go woo-woo on you, but I love to. So this talks about, you can see the grid there, and there's 4 boxes, and they are separated by fear-based actions or love-based actions. And, all the big philosophers talk about there's 2 prime emotions. One is love and one is fear. Everything else is a subderivative of either fear or love. And so what we do is either fear-based or love-based. And I don't think I need to explain that even further. But then there's also internal and external motivators. So something that's coming from within you or something that's coming from outside of the inner environment onto you. And the grid is much like Maslow and much like the next theory we're going to talk about, but it talks about how we can either avoid pain, okay, or we can move towards love. So it's kind of the thing where you can either get busy dying or get busy living. And you're either moving towards, dying, or you're moving towards living, and everything we do is part of this grid. So this is very interesting in that if I want to talk to you, I'm going to talk to you about fear-based internal. Okay, so if we are motivated internally fear-based, you see fear-based internal, then what we're talking about is there's a deficiency within me, there's something wrong with me, there's a defiance, this isn't going to happen to me. It's almost like a denial, that it's a minimization of risks, almost like a teenager where, I can smoke. Many people have smoked all their lives and never gotten lung cancer. And there's a guy who ran marathons every day and dropped dead of a heart attack. You know what I mean? That kind of denial, that kind of defiance. And, one of the things with internal fear-based is there's a lot of self-imposed um, requirements, and there's a lot of shoulds, musts, have tos. There's pressure that we put on imperative terms. I have to, I should, I must, like I should exercise today or I'll lose my shape. I have to do this or, this is going to happen. So again, when we are motivated through internal fear-based reasoning, it's mostly because we feel there's something lacking in ourselves. We have to do something, we must, we should, or there's a defiance against a pushback, like that's not going to happen to me, or a denial like, again, one more won't hurt me. Okay, so that's an internal fear-based. And then we go to external fear-based, and these are threats that could be from the outside environment. And I think of immediately, and I shouldn't, but the CDC smoking advertisements that are pretty graphic and a little depressing and gruesome. And, that's a threat. A lot of public health campaigns are based on scaring people. And, maybe your doctor has scared you, or people who are exerting their influences to try to scare you into or threatening you, like if you don't do this, if you don't lose weight, I'm going to leave you. A lot of our maybe intimate relationships may be based on an external fear-based, where we want to do stuff because if not, someone's going to leave us or divorce us or, make fun of us or whatever. So, there's external fear-based that moves us into action. There's internal fear-based that moves us into action. But unfortunately, a lot of this action is short-lived. It's not healthy. It's not supportive of long-term growth. Another external fear-based might be some of our social mores, some of our cultural cadences. And what I mean by that is maybe women should not be strong, or, men don't do that because it's women's work, or there might be just certain things like I have to put my family first. I don't have time to go to, exercise or take a walk. So there might be some cultural or social mores that influence us, that threaten us in terms of that. Yeah, so that's fear-based. And then when we go down here, we have external love-based, and then internal love-based. And external love-based is supporting systems. And these are, again, we talk about the power of role modeling. We talk about the power of having support groups. We talk about the power of supportive and loving and conditions that exert positive influences on us. And some of the support love-based might be things like smoking policy, where we support people in making better decisions out of love by implementing control. And so these are positive peers, healthy norms, positive environmental conditions. These help us to be motivated in a love-based supportive way. But finally, I've left the big one to the end, and this is the internal love-based, and this is wholeness. And what this is all about is it's pretty much like self-actualization. It's self-actualization, much like the top of Maslow's hierarchy. And it's just about the fact that this is about love of self and love of others in one big mixture. It's the grandfather who swims 4 times a week, not because he likes swimming, but he wants to be with his grandkids. And this is where it's all about, protecting what is loved, expressing love, receiving love, joy, satisfaction, desire. It feels good, and we do things and we are motivated to do things out of love. And it's from a sense of internal love that outsprings into external manifestation. I know that's woo-woo, but you can, I don't know. I do things internally love-based all the time, right? When I give of service, when I, stay late to help a kid, or when I, do something special for my husband, or when I surprise my friends with, you know what I mean? So I'm constantly doing that. No one's telling me to do it, but I do it because it makes me whole. It makes me happy. Feels good, right? So which one of these do you think is the strongest of the motivators? Is it internal fear? Is it external fear? Is it love external or love internal? And of course, you're going to say the most longest lasting, the most deepest, the strongest motivator is going to be the internal love, right? Okay. So when we look at motivation, we can look at it from many different theories, from Maslow, from Arlovsky, and then the final one is predetermination. motivation theory. And we'll get to that in a minute. Here's a slide I forgot about, but I love this one. It's kind of puts things in perspective, whether it's fear-based or love-based, whether it's internal or external. Here's why. Someone asked me, well, why do you dance? And you can answer two ways. I dance because my girlfriends drag me out on the floor. I'm so uncomfortable. I'm very self-conscious, but I do it because of the group and because I don't want to sit by myself on the sidelines. That's even worse, fate of death. I'd rather be out there making an ass of myself than, but it's all pressure. It's peer pressure, right? Or I dance because it feels so good. I get lost in the music and I love moving to the beat. And, that's definitely internal love based. You dance because it just feels good to you and you want to do more of it because it's fulfilling. Okay. And then here's one. Why do you golf? Well, I can golf because I make deals. I meet clients. Rich people do it and I want to look successful. So that's why I go out. Do you see how that might be, more of a fear based? You're doing it not because you love it. And the second one says, I just like going outdoors. I like being with my friends. I like kicking back. And so again, you can see how people do things for different reasons based on whether they're internally or externally motivated or love or fear based. Okay. So that's Orlowski's grid. And I think next is self-determination. I'm sorry, predetermination, self-determination theory. This is probably one of my most favorite ones and the one I use most in counseling. I mean, I use all of them, but self-determination theory is probably the most recent from 2008. So it's only, 12 years old and it's still being researched. It's still, being picked apart and, improved and questioned. So, it's not a perfect theory, but what it talks about is, I love this because motivation, again, lives on a spectrum. It's not one or the other. And it changes depending on, again, the action that you're talking about. So they talk a lot about the fact that, we're not motivated like a rainstorm on us where it gets us all wet. One raindrop might motivate us for one action and one raindrop might not motivate us for another action. So again, motivation like stage of change. This reminds me a lot of stage of change, where we move through a process of change and we can move through a process of motivation. And the different steps are a motivation. And what that means is that you're not motivated at all. And so that gives you a place to sit where you're not moved to, understand, why we do things or, how we change our behavior. You're not interested in doing that. So you could be an A motivation. And there's things we could do for people who are A motivated, just like there's things we could do for people who are in pre-contemplation, correct? But then you move into this spectrum where, we talk about external and we're moving into intrinsic. So I think I better stop here and talk about the fact that there is and extrinsic motivators and intrinsic motivators. And just like the words sound like, extrinsic means that it's a type of motivation in which a person performs an action because it leads to an outcome that is separate from or external to the person. So extrinsic motivation is a motivation which a person performs something for an outcome that's outside. Okay, so that's extrinsic motivation. And then intrinsic motivation is a type of motivation in which you perform something because it's rewarding or satisfying for some internal reason. So we have external motivators and we do it because of the outside, and then we have internal because of the inside. And I think when we look at school, let's look at your school. You could be extrinsically motivated for that grade, for that A, but you could be intrinsically motivated because you love learning and it feels great and you love what you're learning, you're passionate and you think it's fun. Do you see how school, you could use both external motivation, the A, the getting the grade, plus the internal motivation? That's very powerful. Plus then also just work. You are externally motivated at work. Why? Because every 2 weeks you get a paycheck. So you're motivated to go because externally there is a motivation because it leads to an outcome that is separate from you. Okay, the outcome is your paycheck. But then you could also be intrinsically motivated, okay, and where you do your work because you love it so much. It was kind of like me at the public health department. I used to laugh and say I didn't even care if I got a paycheck. It was like kind of like, what is this in my bank account? How fun. I thought my reward was how how much I enjoyed my work and how fulfilling my work was. So that's an internal. And when you can, you know, internal motivation, and you see it over to the right, integrated and intrinsic motivation, that is the most powerful. Okay. This is where you are more likely to maintain and sustain behaviors over the long term if you're focused here on integrated and intrinsic. And this is just inherently the fun of the activity. You're engaged for the enjoyment and the interest, and it's in harmony with your values. So you're doing things that really make you hum because they are love-based, internally driven, right? So it's almost like Orlovsky's grid. But then do you see over to the left, external and introjected? These are more extrinsic motivators. And this is where, you're doing things because of direct rewards or punishments, okay? There's pressure. There's pressure to perform, and you're going to get it externally. And introjected means the fact that you're doing things to avoid behaviors and feeling bad. So that's almost like internal fear-based, like Arlovsky's grid. So the fact is that, you feel bad and you want to feel better, so you do it. And again, it might feel that you're guilty, or you're feeling guilty, I guess is a good one, anxiety or shame, so you put forth effort to get out of that. So again, looking at external, and and I'm not saying external driven motivation is bad. Sometimes you need external motivation, but as a coach, as a guide, teacher, and supporter, you want to get your clients from external into internal, right? So how can we get from external to the internal? And I guess I'll give you an example of me and exercise. When I first started exercising and building a consistent exercise routine, I externally motivated myself, where I would give myself free time if I met my workout goals, or I might get a lipstick or a CD or something like that, right? Okay. And then what happened is, the longer and longer and longer I worked out, the more the CD and the lipstick didn't matter, because I was starting to like it in the sense of, I liked the way I was changing. I could feel good, and it just was fun. I found reasons to want to go because I got to see all the pups in the neighborhood. I was starting to meet my neighbors. I love looking at all the flowers during the seasons and watching the seasons go by. I love, being out in the weather and the sun and the wind. So, what happened is that before it, I was motivated to exercise based on external reasons, but after time I realized I was being motivated to exercise for more internal, and that was more long lasting. Okay. And just so you know, your clients are going to fall in the spectrum. So, like, when I first started with exercise, I was very externally motivated. I probably could have said I was amotivated. Oh my gosh, it was such a struggle, right? And now I'm more integrated. I don't know if I would ever be intrinsic, because I don't think I'm ever going to be one of those people that says, oh my gosh, this is so much fun, I cannot wait, goody, 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 I get to work out. Okay, I'm never going to be like that, but that's okay. But there are some people who are like that. Like, I have a friend, she's one of my former students, and she just lives, well, she's a, personal trainer. She just, exercise for her just makes her so happy. She was probably that kid in gym class that just always got A's and got picked first, you know what I mean? And I wasn't. But, when it comes to eating vegetables, we're totally the opposite, where I'm very intrinsically motivated to eat vegetables. I love them. But then you meet clients, and my friend is the same way. She's like, I can't stand them. And I'm like, oh, come on, that can't be. She's like, she has to force herself with like French fries and chocolate to eat. If she eats her vegetables, then she gets a little treat. So, you know what I mean? She's still in with vegetables, she's still externally motivated. Okay. She needs something to help propel her action on the outside. And so, your clients might, fall on the spectrum, and they might be very different from you. Like, eating vegetables, they could live somewhere else on this spectrum than you, or exercising, or whatever, going to bed early, you know what I mean? So finding out whether someone's internally or externally motivated can be very helpful. Finding out where their values are, and again, their why, looking at, I want to because. So these are very important aspects. And again, people's motivation for different behaviors can change based on what the behavior is. So keep that all in mind. I really love self-determination theory. I think it's a great theory. I think it's going to be around for a while. And it makes sense to me. And clients, we have good conversations about the fact that they can be in different places on the spectrum for different behaviors. And that's part of your journal prompt, is to talk about that. Are you motivated in different areas in different ways? Like, you, again, might need more external motivation in one area and more internal motivation in another area. And you can look at it that way. And then our job as coaches is to move ourselves and our clients through this process. And there's different techniques we can do. A lot of it has to do with exploring values, committing to values. There could be some mindfulness training in here. Yeah, so a lot of reflection, a lot of internal work. And again, with motivation, our job is to help clients have faith that the effort will be worth it, to remind them that, there's a reason to keep going. And it's not about when the going gets tough, the tough get going. It's about the fact that the behaviors are aligned with our values and what we care about and what matters most to us and what will become most self-fulfilling. And during a moment of crisis, we can pause, like we talked about, between stimulus and response. We can, choose differently with mindfulness. And again, usually with unhealthy behaviors, there's an immediate reinforcement. There's the relaxation or the reduction of anxiety because we get to sit on the couch, or there's the little dopamine hit of sugar or whatever. And with healthy behaviors, it usually takes time until a lot of the positive factors come out. It might take time until they notice a change in how their clothes fit, or a change in how, they walk up the stairs without huffing and puffing so much. So, during that time, as we're moving, from change, from unhealthy to healthy, we might need to remind our clients of what's to come, and how to keep persevering, because there is gratification coming. And the best thing we could do is reinforce, again, when people are doing positive things. As a guide, supporter, and teacher, make sure that we continually reinforce it. And then if it's negative, we can reframe. We can explore. We can help them find self-empowerment. And then also compassion. Compassion with self. If they're tired and they don't want to work out, it's okay. They don't need to beat themselves up over it. But if they choose it mindfully, then it's all fine. You know what I mean? We're allowed to not, we don't have to work out. We're not robots. So, and support them in that exploration. And then finally, I just want to let you know that I don't motivate you. Okay. And you don't motivate me. There's nothing that I can do, no wand, no secret powder or glitter that I sprinkle on you that gives you motivation. I don't motivate you, right? I can be a peer model and support you, and you remember, in a love-based external way. But the bottom line is, I can't get you out of bed in the morning. And it has to come from within the client. So just understand that what we do is find the motivation, find what's important to the client, find what the client values, determine, is an external reward needed or an internal reward? How can we get there? And fan that and celebrate and reinforce, again, notice and name when motivation talk is happening, so that we can celebrate it and we can identify it and become more empowered from it. So that is our discussion on motivation.